Good morning. Welcome to Migraine Headache Awareness Week. We're very excited to introduce our speaker today, Professor Dawn Buse. So, a little bit about Migraine and Headache Australia. It is a division of the Brain Foundation. Our mission is threefold to provide trustworthy and reliable information and bringing you experts like we do today with Professor Dawn Buse. We try to fund a research project each year into migraine and into migraine or headache. And we advocate and support people living with migraine and headache diseases. And we've been busy. So in the last 6 months, we've been doing just that. These are images from a couple of either meetings, events, or activities that we've been involved in. And each session this week, we've been highlighting one of the images or two of the images to sort of call out and let people know what we've been doing. And so today, we're going to be talking about this image in the middle here. You can see that there's no sort of surprises. This is at Parliament House, which is, for those of us who've been to Canberra, you'd recognize very, very distinctly the start of the building. And this was a Women's Health Summit event where I was fortunate enough to represent the Brain Foundation, Migraine Headache Australia. And I'm pictured here with Sophie Scott, who is a health journalist who's had a long career in the space. Her name is probably well known and known by most of us. And she facilitated and emceed this event where we spoke about women's health issues. And surprise, surprise, we probably all agree migraine is a pretty significant women's health issue. It doesn't just affect women, of course, it affects men too, but it really significantly affects women. And from what we've seen with the medical misogyny that has been sort of found to be the case, perhaps a lot more so than it's been acknowledged, women's pain has been minimized. The level of care that women receive versus their male counterparts is less, and therefore the burden, as well as the impact of migraine is far more significant. It's more significant anyway that we know from research, biologically speaking, but this just adds fuel to the fire, which is not what we need. So that was an area where I was representing and making sure that migraine was on people's radar. So that's just one of the little things that we've been doing lately. I've mentioned this on the previous sessions about our advocacy toolkit. If you are interested in speaking to your local MP, your member of parliament, or you'd love to share your story with the press or with a journalist to help destigmatize migraine, then we would welcome you to watch a advocacy session that we did with a group of people from this community. And we also have a toolkit that allows you to set up a meeting with your MP, teaches you like how to prepare for that meeting, how to what to expect, and how to follow up. And it's actually a lot simpler than you think. A lot of MPs will meet with their local members. So if it's your local MP, then you have every right to request a meeting with them to talk to them about migraine and how it affects you. And that's very, very helpful because when they come to adding migraine to the census or talking about migraine on the NDIS or other sort of potential reform or policies that affect migraine, then having someone who understands migraine is going to be critical in those audiences. So we'd encourage you to look at that resource. I'd like to thank as well our event sponsors, AbbVie, Brain Foundation, Pfizer, and Lundbeck. It's their support that allows us to run these sessions and to reach millions of Australians and have thousands of people participate in these events like this today. Now, are you in the right place? If this is your first session and you're wondering that question, if you have migraine or headache, you're in the right place. If you're a parent, partner, or caregiver, if you'd like to connect with others like yourself, we have the chat open. We enjoy sort of the positive and constructive feedback and suggestions that people share. If you want to ask a question to the expert, you are all in the right place and welcome. And just lastly, before we introduce our speaker, we have our free support group on Facebook. I acknowledge that Facebook's not the best tool for everyone, but in terms of the infrastructure it provides to run a support group, it's very easy for us to use. And we have over 5,000 members in our support group. So if you're ever looking for an opinion from another person living with migraine, or you just need to let something out or share a little win, it's a great environment to do so. Now, to introduce our speaker, I'm really excited to introduce Professor Dawn Buse. She's a clinical professor of neurology at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine. She's a member of the board of directors of the Headache Cooperative of the Pacific. She's a licensed psychologist. She's authored more than 200 scientific manuscripts. She's won 8 US international and US awards and 6 professional awards for her work in the field of migraine. Um, she has been an investigator of numerous studies. I'm a big fan of her work. Everything she publishes, I try to read, and I'm still reading. There's some famous studies here, like the AMP study, the Cameo study. These are household names if you are a headache specialist, and sort of regular studies that people refer to. Suffice to say, you couldn't ask for someone better to speak about this topic and the intersection of pain, chronic pain, and mental health and migraine itself. So we're really fortunate to have her, and we'll be getting very soon into her presentation. We also have Anik Grundy, who's our grants program manager and digital lead. She's been behind a lot of the content that we've created on the website that gets medically reviewed for migraine and headache. She often will be sending out our emails. She helps organize the researchers, the Australian early career researchers who are often getting grants and funding from the Brain Foundation and Migraine Headache Australia. And she's also the person behind Brain Awareness Week. And so she'll be joining us today in the comments as the moderator. So feel free to say hi to Anik. And we're also joined by Vanessa Mundell, who's a moderator as well. So big thank you to the team helping us today.
Hello, I'm Dawn Buse, and I'm really honored to present this important topic, chronic painful diseases and mental health for Migraine and Headache Awareness Week. A little bit about me. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist as well as a clinical professor of neurology. So I do see people individually in my office one-on-one, as well as I've been privileged to work on many large studies of life with migraine, where I've collected data from hundreds of thousands of people. In addition, I experienced migraine myself. So I have multiple perspectives on life with migraine. And of course, the most important data comes from you, people living with migraine who have informed me all sorts of aspects of life with migraine. So in this important topic today, we're going to talk about disability, as well as the relationships between migraine and psychiatric or psychological diseases, comorbidities, as well as life impact. So we all know that migraine is disabling. This is not news to us. This is not news to anyone watching. But the World Health Organization has also informed that, yes, indeed, migraine is, in fact, the second most disabling disease on the planet, according to years lived with disability. When we figure that 1 billion people globally live with migraine, and we figure how much lost time there is due to migraine attacks, as well as interictally, it's actually known to be incredibly disabling and burdensome on people around the world. Not only is it disabling and burdensome on the individual with migraine, but as you know, it can also be disabling and burdensome to their family members, to their colleagues, and to society. So migraine has a huge global impact. So let's talk a little bit about comorbidity, co-occurring conditions, and life impact. So migraine has many comorbidities, and comorbidity means that 2 or more things that occur at higher rates than by chance alone. So that means that if someone has migraine, they are also more likely to have other diseases, other life experiences, other conditions than someone who doesn't have migraine. And in just a second, I'll show you a list of some of the known comorbidities. Here is an example of many of the known comorbidities of migraine. This means if someone has migraine, they are more likely than someone in the general population to have any of the disease listed on this slide. And in fact, they often have many of these conditions and diseases in kind of a constellation. And because we have so many, one thing we've done is group them into different types of diseases. So migraine has comorbidities in the psychiatric, psychological realm, like anxiety, depression, PTSD. I'm going to delve into those more in just a minute. But migraine also has known comorbidities in respiratory, allergies, asthma, allergic rhinitis, bronchitis, sinusitis, COPD. Also painful conditions, arthritis, osteoarthritis, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, lower back pain, neck pain, as well as central nervous system diseases such as insomnia, restless leg syndrome, or vertigo, as well as cardiovascular events and conditions like angina, heart attacks or myocardial infarctions, hypertension, high cholesterol, as well as GI diseases like GERD, irritable bowel syndrome. So it's known that someone who lives with migraine also has a higher likelihood for any of these diseases. And let's talk a little bit more specifically. What are the psychiatric or psychological diseases or conditions that are well established to be comorbid with migraine? That's going to include anxiety, where we see rates in the general population of people having anxiety at about 15%, about 20% of people in the general population with migraine have anxiety, and that increases as monthly headache day frequency increases, as well as pain intensity. So if we look in a clinic, so people seeking care for migraine in a tertiary clinic, we might see 50, 60, 70% of them having anxiety. Same goes true for depression. We're also going to see pretty high rates compared to the general population of post-traumatic stress disorder or the response following a traumatic incident or event of hypervigilance, nightmares, re-experiencing disturbing memories, panic attacks, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, phobias, specific phobias, general phobias, as well as some related specifically to migraine, as well as some life events like adverse childhood experiences and stressful life experiences. People with migraine are more likely to have all of these conditions or any of these conditions compared to someone without migraine. So those are comorbidities. In addition to actually being at the level where a healthcare professional would say, you have all the criteria, you meet diagnostic criteria, I'm going to diagnose you with this disease, there's also a range of symptomatology. So someone may or may not meet criteria for depression or anxiety getting a diagnosis, but they're very likely to have some of the symptoms of those experiences. Depressive symptomatology, anxious symptomatology. So there's kind of a continuum. Someone may meet criteria and be diagnosed and be treated for something, or they may have some symptomatology. Maybe they met criteria before, but they've kind of lowered their symptoms or their symptoms are increasing. For all these conditions, they are more common with more frequent monthly headache day frequency. So someone with higher frequency EM is more likely to have these diseases than someone with less frequent migraine. Someone with chronic migraine, which is migraine on 15 or more days per month, of which migraine is linked to 8 days, is more likely to have any of these conditions than someone with lower frequency episodic migraine. So these rates of any comorbidities do increase with monthly headache day frequency. In addition, let's talk about all the potential impacts of migraine. I think of migraine as kind of throwing a pebble in a pond and you have these ripples. Migraine can affect literally all aspects of life, from the biggest decisions and important events to the most mundane daily activities. As you know, migraine is a chronic, episodic attack disease. That means that someone kind of has migraine, their nervous system experiences migraine, but these attacks happen from time to time. For some people, the attacks are very frequent. For a small percentage of people who really have almost daily attacks, and then some people have continuous pain. But the majority of people with migraine have times of attacks and then times free from attacks, and we call that the interictal period. But even during that time between attacks, there can still be impact because someone's thinking, when is the next attack going to happen? How do I need to plan to avoid it? What sorts of things should I not do? And so there's a lot of worry and preparation decision making that happens between attacks or before attacks. So the Cameo study was a large web-based study of people living with migraine in the US. And then we recently, at the 10-year anniversary mark, recollected data from the Cameo study of people in 5 countries. Unfortunately, we did not get to Australia and New Zealand. We did get to Japan, as well as Canada, the US, the UK, Germany. And we asked about the impact of migraine on career and financial stability. And we can see that across the board, everyone said migraine has negatively impacted my career. It's negatively impacted my household finances. And we see that that impact is greater with people with more frequent migraine, with chronic migraine in the lighter color compared to episodic migraine in the darker color. We also sent out a survey to willing partners or spouses of people with migraine who also said that their finances or their career trajectory was affected by their spouses or their partners' migraine. And we also surveyed adolescents or teenagers of people with migraine who also told us about impacts due to their parents' migraine. In addition, there's a lot of emotional guilt, sadness, frustration, anger that comes along with living with this chronic, painful, unpredictable disease. And in the Cameo study, we asked, did people think that they would be a better partner if they didn't have migraine or headaches? And we can see that almost everyone said yes. In fact, we have about 80% of those with chronic migraine saying, I feel that. And then a little bit fewer, but still really high in the high 70s of people with low frequency episodic migraine, followed by um, followed followed down kind of the steps through high frequency episodic migraine, moderate frequency episodic migraine, and low frequency episodic migraine. People also said they'd be a better parent if they didn't have migraine or headache. And then we actually found that 10% of people with chronic migraine said, I chose not to have children. I delayed having children or had fewer children because of migraine. And we see that even among people with the lowest frequency episodic migraine, a few people did also endorse that they made that huge life decision based on migraine. You may not be surprised to learn that migraine is really a stigmatized disease, meaning that there is some perception that people living with migraine either aren't trying hard enough or are too wimpy or aren't strong enough. And a lot of times that perception can even come from within. There's a lot of people living with migraine who feel a lot of guilt about things that they can't do or things they have to miss out on. And so in the Overcome study, which was a survey of 60,000 people with migraine in the US, we asked about symptoms of stigma and found a large response among people who said they either felt that others thought that they were using migraine to get out of responsibilities, kind of faking how bad it was, or just that the people close to them did not understand, believe, or realize how disabling, painful, and disruptive a migraine attack or life with migraine is. We also looked in a clinic survey in New York City, in our clinic and some other surrounding clinics, and found that when people did feel stigma associated with their migraine, they felt guilt, shame, embarrassment, less than or unworthy. They were more likely to also experience depression, to have anxiety, to have worse quality of life, and to have catastrophizing or kind of a pattern of worrying where you kind of snowball down a hill and you think, oh my gosh, my next migraine, I'm going to miss X, Y, Z at work or school, and that's going to cause me to really fall behind. And once I fall behind, I won't catch back up. It's a pattern of kind of snowballing down the hill that a worry magnifies and grows. And we found that that was very associated with feeling stigmatized. And this is really important. Stigma exists within migraine on multiple levels. It exists globally. That before our more recent World Health Survey, we didn't really think of migraine as a disabling disease on a global international government perspective. And we needed those World Health Organization data to say, yes, this is truly a disabling disease. That's great because that brings some recognition. That also can bring funding for research. It can help payers support treatments. It can help doctors take diseases seriously, as well as colleagues, coworkers, and employers. So that was really important. We also can think about stigma existing kind of on the individual level, where someone themselves feels guilty, embarrassed, ashamed, sad, angry. And we really want to help people move beyond that way of feeling, take that burden off of their shoulders and say, this disease is not your fault. This is a neurologic disease. It has genetic predispositions. It has known genes. This is a serious disease. This is not a weakness of someone's character. This is not people trying to get out of responsibilities. This is a genetic neurologic disease. So that's a really important thing for us to keep in mind as people cope with and live with migraine. Living with a chronic, painful, unpredictable disease is not an easy road, and it's not for the faint of heart. It's very likely and common that people living with migraine or other chronic painful diseases, other primary headache diseases, other chronic pain diseases experience feelings of frustration, anger, depression, worry, disappointment, shame. These are all very normal reactions to a very hard human experience. So you have a right to these feelings. And like in 2018, the My Migraine Voice survey was given out to people around the world who had 4 or more monthly migraine days. And they were asked, how do you feel about living with migraine? And almost half said they felt misunderstood by people, and about 40% said they felt depressed about it, they hated their life, or they felt helpless or out of control. So these are really common feelings and reactions to living with a painful, unpredictable chronic disease that has such big life impact. And I think it's really important to acknowledge and give yourself some grace and think about what have you missed or lost because of migraine. And I know that for everyone living with migraine, there will be different answers to how migraine has affected you. It's okay and valuable to give some time and space to these feelings. In fact, it's very possible that you're not living life the way you wanted to or the way that you expected. And there's some grieving in that, and there's mourning in that. And it's important to give yourself the space and the permission to feel sad about what is not the way that you wish it could be. But what do we do with those feelings? Well, after we give them some space and acknowledgement, we start to think about how can we adjust and kind of raise our quality of life. And this is some really interesting data from multinational happiness studies, where it turns out that it's not always as important as to what you have, and that's kind of the top of this denominator, as to what your expectations are. And so happiness can come from having everything, having so much, having a lot, or expecting a little bit less. And I think when people live with a chronic disease like migraine, they start to adjust their expectations and start to find joy and happiness and pride in sometimes smaller, quiet moments of life. Interestingly, the My Migraine Voice study also asked people, is there anything positive about having migraine? And you might think, what a strange question. But in fact, more than half of respondents were able to think of at least one thing that was positive, including I learned how to cope better, or it made me stronger. So this is a nice time to stop and think, what has migraine given you? How have you become stronger or more resilient? Or if you don't feel that you have become stronger or more resilient, what are your goals? What are your desires? What are your hopes and plans for yourself? How do you want to adjust your life? And how do you want to kind of continue to live in a way that feels most rewarding, most positive to you within the constraints of kind of where you are now? That's something to think about. I'd like to invite you to kind of flip the way of thinking and think about how has living with a chronic, painful disease made you stronger? What strengths, what aptitudes, what resilience have you gained from living with a chronic, painful disease? Or if you don't feel that you have, but you're watching this video now, you're participating in Migraine and Headache Awareness Week, what are your goals? What are your next goals for yourself? What aspect of life do you want to work on and advocate for yourself? What would you like to see change? Here are some elements that go into healthy migraine or other type of headache or chronic pain disease management. We always want to think about getting the best medications possible. If medication is part of your treatment plan, making sure you're diagnosed and seen by a healthcare professional if that's part of your treatment plan. Limiting caffeine and healthy eating and drinking, staying hydrated, staying physically active, trying to maintain a healthy body mass index, acknowledging and managing those comorbid conditions be they psychological, respiratory, cardiac. We always want to kind of be aware of all of those and get treated for those. Managing stress to the best degree possible. And we can't always control what happens to us, but we can think about our reaction to it and how it affects us. And that's where strategies like cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, relaxation training come into play. Keeping a healthy diet and healthy regular sleep habits. Sleep is so important and it can really play a big role in living well with any chronic condition. What do these things all have in common? Well, they all work together to reduce inflammation and improve the resilience of our nervous system. And that's how all of these healthy habits can really help us live better with chronic diseases. Often people who live with chronic diseases can be really hard on ourselves. We have such high expectations even when facing chronic painful attacks. So I want to remind you to please be gentle on yourself. Be as kind and gentle to yourself as you would be to your friends, your family members, and others around you. I want to talk about the importance of finding your connected group. Obviously, you're already participating in Migraine and Headache Awareness Week, and this is a great thing to do. Find the group of like-minded individuals who you feel supported by. It may be online, it may be in person, it may be all of the above or a combination. But finding people who understand and accept you can be really, really great for your mental health and well-being. Please don't be afraid to ask for help. And part 2 of this is you have to accept help. And not only is it good for you when you accept help, but it's good for your friends and family and coworkers who are offering. People want to help, and it makes them feel better too. So have a list of ideas ready. When people say, how can I help? Have a couple ideas ready and offer that. Maybe you're a parent and you want to say, well, next time I have a migraine, if you could bring home my child from school or take him for a play date, have that idea ready. If you need help with shopping or meal planning, or you simply need a family member to be quiet and give you some space to sleep, that's something they could do to help, and that makes everybody feel good. Think about what you can do that's outside of yourself. Often volunteering and helping others is a wonderful thing for our mental well-being and our spirit. It really engages the good feelings that come with helping others and helps to take us away from the focus of the challenges of living with a chronic painful disease for a little time. When it comes to stress management, there are some things that we can't control, some things we can't change, and acceptance is really important in living with a chronic painful condition. We have to think about what can we not change. We have to accept that and learn to let it go. And John Kabat-Zinn said, we can't stop the waves from coming, but we can learn how to surf. So we can strategize and learn ways to feel more resilient and ride over the rougher parts of life. Reclaim your identity. This idea is really important. Often when we have any type of disease or illness, that can become a big part of our identity, and we can lose other parts of the identity that were so important to us or that we're proud of or that we enjoy or bring us joy. And so sometimes when you're living with a chronic painful disease, it feels like life can get smaller and smaller, and you become just a person with migraine or a person with fibromyalgia or a person with chronic fatigue. And I want to remind you, you're so much more than that. Yes, that is part of you, but you're so much more. And it's really important to think about what defines you in all of the elements of your life. And we can take a lesson from the Japanese art of golden joinery or kintsugi, where beautiful porcelain that's broken is put back together with gold and jewels. And I like this metaphor because, as we talked about, your life may not be what you expected it to be or what you wanted it to be. You may not be living life you'd hoped or dreamed of. But there's a lot of beauty that comes out of adversity, a lot of lessons, and a lot of amazing connections, as well as life choices that can come from living through adversity. So think a little bit about how your life may be different, but some of the aspects of it that are still sweet and important to you and that you're proud of and feel good about. Finally, I want to always advise, please seek professional help when you need it. And when do you need it? Anytime that any of these symptoms start to become unmanageable. Depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. These are all comorbid with migraine, meaning people with migraine, people with cluster headache, people with fibromyalgia, people with other chronic painful diseases are more likely to have any of these experiences. And if it feels that these are becoming unmanageable, please reach out to a mental health professional. This is what we're here for. This is what we want to do. And this is what we know how to do. There are a lot of ways to get help, being it non-medication talk therapy, medication therapies, and other types of therapies as well. So you can always talk to your primary care doctor and get started there, or reach out to hotlines or warm lines, or get referrals to specialists. But just know that we're all here and we have strategies that are scientifically proven to be helpful. So please don't feel shy, ashamed, or worried about getting help. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate being invited to speak on this important topic that's so dear to my heart. And I hope that you found some of this information useful and helpful. And I hope you enjoyed this session as much as I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dawn Buse. What a wonderfully validating presentation. And we hear about the pain of chronic migraine so often, but what is not sort of discussed or nearly as well known is the psychological warfare that goes on as well as a result of chronic pain, as a result of having an invisible illness, as a result of the stigma and sometimes discrimination that we face that kind of adds insult to the injury of migraine. So thank you for validating so many of us in that presentation. We're going to open now to questions. We've got Q&A questions that have been coming in, so thank you to those that have been submitting. Feel free to vote for those questions that you'd like answers to. We're going to be sort of starting at the top of the list with the most upvotes and working our way more or less down through the list. So we'll jump in now with the first question coming from Valentina. She said that while building up to a migraine attack, there's a shift in mood, which can be difficult for us and our partners. How do we effectively prevent that?
Oh, that is the prodrome or pre-headache. And so it's important to remember that the migraine attack, I'm in San Diego, so I'm going to say a migraine attack is a whole enchilada of awfulness. We have a prodrome, about 24 hours of truly different symptoms mediated by the hypothalamus. Includes irritability, fatigue, excessive yawning, excessive urination, cognitive impairments, and you may have your own special symptoms that come from this change. It means the attack has already started. Sometimes it's a good time to jump on any treatments, be they pharmacologic, non-pharmacologic, sleeping, meds, whatever's your go-to. Gather your comfy stuff, call out of work, get help with your kids, whatever it is you do. That first 24 hours means that those dominoes in your neurologic system have started and that cortical spreading depression has started. That's about 24 hours. And we just did a really nice study here in the US called the MICOA study, Measuring What Matters, that the United States FDA is sponsoring because they want us to find out what do people living with migraine want to be endpoints for clinical trials? Like, how would we say, yes, that worked for me? So we interviewed people qualitatively, just said, tell us what happens before the headache. We got a list of about 40 things that happen before the headache, and they all do seem to be mediated by a certain part of the brain, the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is our calendar. So all sorts of things that have to do with timing, regulation, sleep, wake, all sorts of kind of cycles. So what I would advise is kind of educate people, your partners, your family members, your close people, your colleagues that you trust, your HR that needs to know, and say, during the first phase of my migraine attack, these 20 things can happen. After the prodrome or pre-headache, then you've got that headache phase. And the headache phase does not come on its own. Oh no, as you said, Carl, let's add some insult to injury. In addition to the headache, we get to be nauseous, super sensitive to senses, light, sound, odors. I mean, who can walk by a candle store when they're, having a migraine attack, or manage people's perfumes and colognes? That's all headache phase. And then after that's over, the party's not done. We have the postrom, which is also going on neurologically and has its own couple dozen strange symptoms, which often include fatigue, feeling cognitively impaired, feeling washed out, as well as some other symptoms. And if this is of interest, I invite people to click on PubMed, which is where all of our scientific articles sit and are available to read the abstracts free of charge, if that sounds like fun for you. I'm kind of a nerd, so it's kind of fun for me, but look up MICOAS, MICOAS. That's our migraine scale that we're developing. And you can see those lists of, 100 different symptoms that people with migraine spontaneously reported. And you might be surprised or not surprised that you say, oh yeah, I get all these unusual constellations. And migraine is not just the head, it's a head to almost toe experience, or at least head to the bottom of the GI system. Migraine includes GI. It includes TMI embarrassing things like flatulence and constipation. And they all make sense when we realize that this nervous system controls all of these body parts, and it gets activated, and these dominoes get released, and all these different systems are involved, really, from the brain on down.
Julie had a question that kind of is related to that. She said that there's a lot of comorbidities with migraine. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that happens in both the postdrome and predrome and throughout the attack. What kind of links all of them together? She said that she's heard of something called mast cell activation and doesn't know if that's related to it or not. Can you provide some insight there?
She is on to something. So when we try to figure out a lot of comorbidities, let's go depression, anxiety, migraine, let's say fibromyalgia and migraine. I saw in the chat people mentioning endometriosis and migraine. I love the way she's thinking. What could be a shared underlying state of being? It's probably inflammation. Inflammation seems to be one of our kind of biologic states that's become pretty common, unfortunately, due to a lot of factors. Our diets, our stress, our BMI, all sorts of things. So a good guess for a lot of things is going to be inflammation. And when she talked about mast cell activation, that is also something that's highly related to inflammation. But we kind of have to take the comorbidities in pairs or even in little clusters and say, what do these couple have in common? Beyond inflammation, they may share something else. Let's say migraine and depression. That's one of my favorite comorbidities because we've studied it front and back and sideways. We know a lot about migraine and depression. So I'd say inflammation's involved in migraine and depression. I would say environmental activation, like adverse childhood experiences, like trauma, like war, like traumatic brain injury. Then I would say shared neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine. And then we would say a shared kind of place in the brain, these parts of the brain that control mood as well as migraine activation. So we have like a quadruple whammy here, that migraine and depression, as well as migraine and anxiety, and the other psychiatric diseases, they're sharing a lot. They got a lot of things here on the same tracks. And that's one reason why I really don't want people to think that depression is a response to you're not handling migraine well enough. No. We have two diseases. Let's call them apples and oranges. Because when we say depression, people think, oh, this is my not coping well enough. No, let's just say disease D and disease M both have shared genetics, shared epigenetics, shared neurotransmitters, shared brain structure, and shared neuroanatomy. Of course, they travel together.
I think the other thing that I still remember you said to me maybe 6 years ago now was that well, of course, if you have chronic migraine, of course, you're going to feel some level of anxiety and depression, because having a chronic pain disorder that results in a neurological attack that's debilitating, that few people understand, that occurs without predictability, that's a reason for anxiety. And if you've been trying to treat it, if you've been cycling through different treatments, different doctors, and you're not getting results, well, it's only a matter of time before you feel like depressed. It's a normal reaction to a horrible situation that a lot of people,
Absolutely.
today are struggling with. And I think that giving ourselves permission is part of, taking it easy on ourselves. Like it's a pretty common, if you're a normal human being, you're going to feel that way after a certain amount of time.
Oh, let's even say a lower frequency episodic migraine. Let's say 4 days per month. And I bet a lot of people listening are going to say, "Oh, I would take that. I could handle that." Let's say I'm not your fairy godmother. Let's say I'm the Wicked Witch of the West, and I go to someone without migraine and I say, "Hey, get ready. Once a week, without warning, I'm going to make you feel really awful at about 4 in the morning. You're also going to miss your whole day. It's only once a week. It's no big deal. You'll handle it." I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
this is ridiculous. And that's 4 days a month.
Yeah.
That's not 15, 25, or 30. This is a ridiculous thing to ask of any human or animals. Animals get depressed as well when they are faced with punishments that they can't escape. And that Martin Seligman's a psychologist who figured out that learned helplessness, meaning you have these negative things happen and there's not a whole lot you can do about it, leads to really extreme depression. So here people are being pummeled with painful, debilitating experiences that are not real avoidable, out of the blue. And it's just the formula for feeling depressed. But Martin Seligman also, then about 30 years later, came up with learned optimism, and he's the father of positive psychology. And he talked about resilience and coping strategies and shoring yourself up with support and all of these good things, and a lot of things I talked about in the second half of this presentation. So when I give advice like that, I don't want you to think I'm saying this is all easy peasy lemon squeezy, just do A, B, and C and you'll be fine. I'm not saying that. This is rough. And yet I still want to say, even though it's rough, here are some scientifically proven things that can help your well-being or help your family or help your relationships or help your outlook on life, help you enjoy despite where you are.
Great. There was a question about medication for someone with chronic migraine that can help with anxiety. Can you list a few?
Seems like everything that helps with prevention helps with depression and anxiety. So whether you are preventing your migraine through a CGRP targeted MAM, through a GPANT, through neurostimulation, through behavioral therapy, even a traditional oral prevention, there's a study for each one of them saying that when headache days and migraine days go down, depression and anxious symptomatology and Onabot, botulinum toxin or Botox. We got a study for each one, an observational study where we weren't necessarily looking to see that we thought that depression and anxiety would improve. We were looking to see reduce those headache and migraine days, and we saw that depression and anxiety did improve when you successfully treat headache and migraine. Theoretically, yes, there are some that are more logically likely to be twofers, because we know that they do have benefits. One class of traditional oral medications is an antidepressant, although it's an older antidepressant, and sometimes the doses for migraine are lower than what would give for anxiety or depression. And the CGRP targeted MABs CGRP is also involved in depression, anxiety, and inflammation. CGRP is everywhere. It's everywhere. It seems involved in so much. But basically, anything you do that starts to improve migraine, we tend to see an improvement in those symptoms.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, as your chronic pain disorder improves, so does your mental health, because you're having less pain and there's less anxiety.
And then all those shared underlying things. So it's not just the emotional response to it improving. It means your inflammation's going down. It means that those neurotransmitters are calming down and getting to happier, stable levels. So there's a lot of things going on underneath, in addition to, hey, I don't have as much pain and lost time and disability. I feel a little bit less distressed. There's a lot going on in our neurobiology.
So there's a question here saying that migraine sufferers are good at hiding our pain and disappointment. How can stress management help a neurological disorder when our brains are wired so poorly?
So stress management training, be it cognitive behavioral therapy, a relaxation therapy, mindfulness therapy, works in some of those same ways, similar to some of the medications. So it does help kind of shore up the nervous system. We spend a lot of time in the fight, flight, or freeze response. We're kind of always activated. If we were a zebra grazing out on the savannah, we'd be calm, and then there'd be a lion, and our sympathetic activation would happen, and we would run as our life depended on it. We'd get away, and like a half an hour later, we'd just be eating the grass again. No, not as humans. We worry about the last time the lion came, the next time the lion's coming, the time the lion came to my friend, the lion down the road. Like, we can activate our nervous system without actual danger. So we spend a lot of time, logically and rightfully so, worrying about the next attack. What do we need to change? What do we need to plan? What's it going to mess up? Worrying about the last attack and even bigger decisions. And I did see someone in the chat mention that she was thinking about, should she go off medications in order to get pregnant and have children? I mean, one of the biggest life decisions of all time, and she's weighing migraine into it. And she is not alone. She is not alone. If 10% of people with chronic migraine have that same thought, that means millions and millions of people, women and men, who also said to their partners, I don't know about having children because of migraine. So we spend a lot of time activated, rightfully so, planning, worrying. One thing the relaxation therapy does is, when there's not a time that worrying is going to be functional, it quiets it all down. And when we can quiet and calm, we're not producing the neurotransmitters in the same way. We're letting the nervous system calm down. So we have this activated nervous system, and we need to bring it down. And not only do we want to kind of calm and quiet our nervous system, but we also want to keep it really stable. Our brains and the migraine nervous system really does well with normal stability. The more that we kind of keep things at the same level. And you probably know, Carl, surprising, but not only does more stress, but less stress is also a trigger for an attack. It's change. Our nervous systems don't like change. Our nervous systems want sleep, about the same number every night, about the same time to bed, about the same time to wake, about the same level of stress. Don't change it. About the same amount of caffeine. Go down slowly, but don't change it quickly. So cognitive behavioral therapy is behaviors that help normalize, keep those healthy behaviors, as well as these relaxation practices to calm and quiet the nervous system on a regular basis, so that when the trigeminal nucleus caudalis here gets going, and this trigeminal vascular nervous system that drives the attacks gets going, it's starting at a lower level, and we might not be as activated.
Makes a lot of sense, and it also speaks to the theory around brain elasticity, like the maybe not quite rewiring, but we can change the way we process, and those relaxation methods, progressive relaxation therapy, meditation, doing things like exercise or things that we enjoy, can all help in that effort. It's actually a pleasant homework to be given. It's like, yeah, take an hour, go do something you love. Go do something that relaxes you.
I would like to write that on a prescription pad for everybody watching. Go write it down on a piece of paper, put it on your refrigerator. So Dr. Buse has told me that I need to do something I enjoy more days than not, let's say 5 days a week, and tell your spouse and your kids and your boss and your colleagues that this is a medical prescription, and I will sign off on that for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was a question earlier about, like, how can we be kind to ourselves? I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah.
Vincent asked about the evidence or the impact of hypnosis on pain relief. Does it work?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So hypnosis is one of those biobehavioral strategies. Hypnosis is a deep relaxation. We do a lot of relaxation for migraine. Hypnosis is a very deep relaxation. And then when someone is deeply relaxed and receptive, the therapist gives them suggestions that are congruent with what they want. You are feeling calmer, you are feeling more in control of your body. One of my favorite ones is imagining you have a control room in your mind, first getting deeply relaxed, and then you go into your brain and you look and you see where your knob is for pain and your knob is for activation of your brain, and you turn it all down. And then I usually do some breathing with someone, and this whole thing might be 15 or 20 minutes of pretty focused, deep relaxation. And someone feels like they're controlling whatever activation, because again, a migraine attack is an activation. Controlling, turning things down. That's one of my favorites. So hypnosis, you may or may not know, was actually developed by Franz Mesmer of mesmerizing. A physician in Austria 100 years before we had any pain medications, and then was quite popular, was used in places like Massachusetts General Hospital for surgeries. And then ether was introduced. At Massachusetts General Hospital, they used ether in the ether dome to do a surgical extraction of a tooth. And after ether came on the scene, we kind of lost hypnosis and the whole idea all the way up in the United States and in the Western part of the world, maybe until about the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, when transcendental meditation became kind of socially popular. And all of the mindfulness and the meditation came back into the medical world with John Kabat-Zinn in Massachusetts and Herbert Benson, who was a cardiologist at Harvard. So deep mind control has always been useful. And one place it's never left is the Lamaze method for childbirth. From 1960 until today, it's been a staple of pain management for childbirth. So never count out the power of your brain.
Fascinating. I'm impressed by the level of knowledge you have on sort of these topics.
I did my internship at Massachusetts General Hospital, and I was fascinated with I was in pain psychology, and I was fascinated by mindfulness. And so I got to meet Herbert Benson.
Oh, wow.
I heard him lecture. I got to sit in the beautifully ether dome at MGH when I heard Herbert Benson give this talk. And I was a really young kind of newbie intern. And I was just, you have a light bulb moment and you say, oh, I like that. That makes sense. So actually it was kind of some defining moments in me finding my passion as a pain and headache psychologist was some of that work. And I got to experience a little bit in person. I got to train a little bit on a fair amount. I got to train on medical hypnosis in Boston. So I use it today, as you know, as part of a lot of my relaxations, which people can find in various places on my website and in my free biofeedback app. And I just worked with Neurivio, and I recorded relaxation exercises that is free as part of the Neurivio device. So you can hear me do relaxation exercises if you'd like to join me in lots of places.
Can you share your website for people that might be interested in downloading some of those resources?
It's easy peasy. It's dawnbuse.com, DAWN, B as in boy, U, S as in Sam, E.com. And my biofeedback app, which is free also, is in the iTunes store and hopefully soon in the Android store. And it's Juba, Juva, and it might be called Juba Health.
Okay.
And
is that available in the Australian store?
Yes, sir. And if it's not,
Great.
Please email me and we'll turn it on. We're allowed to just turn it on. I think we've got it on everywhere because pretty much people have asked me all sorts of places. So in fact, it should be. If not, you reach out to me and we'll take care of it.
Okay, fantastic. We'll do one last question. It's going to be about inflammation from JG. And they said to say thank you for the great information. Can you advise on any tests we can ask from a GP to determine our levels of inflammation? If we try and adjust our diet or environment or other issues, can we measure the reductions in inflammation levels? And then they called out C-reactive protein not being potentially sensitive enough. Do you have a guide on how to interpret the results?
I really, really like that question. And I'm sorry, I don't have more detailed information. I think it's a great one to ask okay, I have my son here, sorry, weighing in. Um, and, and I don't think Xander or I know the answer. But I love the question and talk to your primary care professional about that. Want to wait and then walk out?
Fantastic. Well, he's arrived at just the right time. We're wrapping up now. So thank you very much. Really appreciate the depth of knowledge and the insights and the validation that you're able to share with us today. Thank you, Professor Dawn Buse.
Thank you, everybody. It's my pleasure.
And for those tuning in, we are also on tonight at 7:30 Australian Eastern Time. We're going to be talking about side effects of medications with Dr. Michael Eller. So we look forward to seeing you there.